Welcome to the Smart and Soulful Money Podcast. I'm your host, Carrie B. VanWinkle. I'm a socially responsive investment advisor with Natural Investments, and a warm welcome to you. Today's guest is Jennifer Pryce, who's the president and CEO of Calvert Impact Capital. I am really excited to talk with Jennifer to share more with you about what Calvert Impact Capital does. They're a very special way that people can invest with their values, but also Jennifer's are going to be our guest expert on the podcast about the Sustainable Development Goals. So today we're doing a deeper dive into the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short. First, let me tell you a little bit about Jenn. Jenn Pryce is, as I mentioned, the president and CEO of Calvert Impact Capital. And if you're familiar with the Calvert Foundation, that was until fairly recently their name. For nearly a quarter of a century, Calvert Impact Capital has strived to make markets work for more people more often by investing in communities overlooked by traditional finance. Calvert Impact Capital invests through organizations that on lend to people and businesses in the U.S. and over 120 countries. In 2017, the organizations in their portfolio provided more than $5 billion to finance everything from solar panels in Tanzania and small businesses in Texas. Over the past decade, Jenn has shaped the strategic direction of Calvert Impact Capital to focus on innovation, sustainability, and scale. Under her leadership, the organization has expanded the sectors it works in, developed new products and services, and committed to sharing their knowledge and expertise with the field on key topics like gender lens investing. Calvert Impact Capital remains committed to ensuring impact investing is accessible to all investors, large and small, having worked with more than 17,000 individuals, institutions, and advisors to raise $2.5 billion since they were founded. Jenn began her career in the Peace Corps, where she taught math in Gabon. She then worked as an equity research analyst for Neuberger Berman and on the investment banking team at Morgan Stanley's London office before joining the Public Theater in New York City and leading the Washington, D.C. regional office for the nonprofit Finance Fund. Jenn studied engineering at Union College and holds an MBA from Columbia University. She currently serves as a Forbes contributor, a lecturer at Oxford Said School of Business, and the advisory board chair of Quantified Ventures. So Jenn brings just a wide scope of experience and interest and life experience even to this amazing and important work that she's doing as a leader with Calvert Impact Capital. Welcome, Jenn.
It's nice to be with you, Carrie.
Great, thank you. So before we get into SDGs, tell us a bit more about what Calvert Impact Capital does and why it's so special.
You know, Calvert Impact Capital has been around about 25, 30 years. And what we've been doing over that time is really offering products and services, financial products and services for people to invest their money in communities. And so kind of the tagline I sometimes say is we're connecting capital and communities. And what that means in practice is we're offering ways for investors for as low as $20, some investors as high as $35 million, to invest by buying a fixed income product, the Calvert Community Investment Note. We also have a syndications business that connects people with investment opportunities. And we take that money we raise and we invest it around the globe. So we reach 100 countries, over 100 countries now, and across all the 50 states in the US, going into private investments that are creating affordable housing, creating quality education, creating healthcare opportunities. You mentioned it at the top. In Tanzania, for example, we're providing the opportunity for individuals to pay as they go, so to rent and therefore afford to be able to put solar panels on their huts so that they can have electricity and increase their safety and opportunity for education with the children. So all these things happen within our portfolio, and it's been going on for more than 2 decades, really engaging people with their money to really find ways to get not only a financial return, but also to have what they feel like is great impact with their investment.
A lot of the organizations that you support, a lot of the impact that the dollars have really are around women and families. Is that right?
That's right. What we have been very committed to over the life of our organization is thinking about gender and how it shows up in our investments. And we think about it as an inclusive lens. You mentioned in the opening that we invest with a gender lens. And what that means to us is we're looking at all our investments and really measuring how they're impacting the lives of women and children. And very honestly, when we start working with some of our investments, they don't score very high in that way. But we hold investments and we have relationships that go on for 5, 10, 15, some are with us for 25 years. And our hope is that over time, we can work with our investments to increase their awareness of how their work affects women and children. So, we look at that everything has an impact on gender. Some is really, really great in our portfolio. Some is a work in progress, but everything is impacting women and children. And we really want to work with our investments to have them really think about the potential of their work and community to really help women and children and therefore help community to the most.
Many people these days are more familiar with the term microfinance.
Yeah.
And really what you all do on the ground to create impact is through this approach of microfinance.
So microfinance is a big part of our portfolio. We have, just stepping back, our portfolio invests, as I mentioned, across the globe, but also invests across a lot of different impact sectors, whether that's affordable housing or access to capital. And microfinance is one of those ways that individuals can get access to money to build their own business, whether it's a hair salon or a kiosk to sell some food on the corner. And these are often women that are looking to build their business, to be entrepreneurs, and are having a challenge finding access to capital from a local bank, for example. And it can be because they have very low savings or that they don't have any collateral like a home or a car to give to the bank in return for access to capital. And so microfinance institutions are around the globe. There's Grameen America in the United States that are providing these microfinance opportunities and access for women and others in the US. And the movement started really internationally with the leadership of Muhammad Yunus years and years and years ago. And now it's really grown to be a really important part of kind of the evolution of access to capital. So these are small loans, again, that are being provided to women and others, maybe $50 up to $2,000. And once they can build their business, then it hopefully puts them on a path to access finance at a local bank or at a larger lender. So really enabling the opportunity for someone to grow their business and really expand their earnings.
For potentially generations.
And it has been going on for 30, 40, 50 years now. And what we're seeing is even microfinance as a sector is becoming very investable. As you're saying, it goes on for generations. And what is also being proven out underneath that is that tool for microfinance to really give opportunity and access to capital for others is one that's arguably got potential and investable. So investors can invest and get their money back and have all this tremendous impact that we just talked about.
So let's switch gears and dive into some basics about sustainable development goals. Some people may have seen this come across their desk or it's in a magazine or in media of some kind where they've heard a talk of sustainable development goals. Maybe they've seen some of the great graphics that are out there naming the areas of the goals. But I think for a lot of people, they don't yet know what this is and what the power of it can be. So would you introduce us to what are these sustainable development goals?
To your point, as I was hearing you talk about all the colorful graphics that are showing up and people are seeing, this is something that has emerged very recently. And so it is new, and many people are still learning about it and still figuring out how it relates to them. It was really only in 2015 that countries came together and really agreed upon an agenda for delivering sustainable outcomes for planet and people. And with that commitment, they outlined 17 different goals that would be looked to as ways to achieve a real sustainable planet. And those 17 goals, I can't list. I need the graphic myself, but I can give you a flavor of what they are. We were just talking about gender, and often, people that are, working with these sustainable development goals often will say the lingo SDG 5. And what that means is really looking at opportunities that advance gender equity or equality. And some people will start with no poverty, which is SDG 1. Some of the others are around education, health, life on land, life in the water, and even peace and justice. So all 17 together are intended to really create a holistic outcome of a planet that has no poverty and really advancing the livelihoods of the people that live on it and protecting the planet that we all use. And what it's really been, and it's exciting watching them come into the work that we do within investments, but really they've come into the work around civil society, into the for-profit realm, into government. These are really cutting across all stakeholders as a real rallying cry that these challenges that we're facing today are huge. And it's going to take all of us coming together in a focused way to really address these challenges with solutions that can really create the great outcomes that we see are possible.
One of the things I love about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is that they can be viewed from an individual lens. So I can use them to help me understand what's most concerning, what's most important for me, then how I want to focus my energy to be a part of this ecosystem of positive change in certain areas that feel like they're my areas. We can't all do everything, but so that it helps me as an individual. And then, like you said, it's any government, institution, organization, nonprofit, for-profit, any lens can use these SDGs to identify how they want to be a part of the change and really focus their impact.
Yeah. And I have to say, you're right. In so many ways, I feel like even in our work, it's made us feel like we're part of a bigger whole. And some of these goals are so daunting. No poverty. That's a big goal. To be able to feel like you're part of a bigger collaboration addressing that theme really is encouraging and uplifting when you're doing and you're thinking about either your personal choices or what you're doing every day in your professional capacity.
Yes, for me, that's one of the reasons that they matter. It's one of the most important things for me about how they help create impact is that they're bringing together energies, around these particular goals. And yes.
And in the world of finance, I find they're very relatable. Sometimes we go out and we talk about the impact of our work as how many new jobs we created with the investments we made, or how many new units of affordable housing we created with the money that we invested on behalf of investors investing in us. And those are great statistics, but they can lose the humanness of it at times. When you're talking about the sustainable development goals, no poverty, it's a much more relatable conversation, I think. And then you can find where, you fit, so to speak, within the 17 sustainable development goals. If what you really want to focus on, or where you want to place your energy is maybe the ocean and gender equality, you now have a way to articulate that and really talk to someone and find a solution to what you want to put your investment dollars in.
The framework that I use to help people think about their money life and then how they want to bring their values into their money life, it names the areas of their money life. And for me, the sustainable development goals, some of the key areas, are philanthropy or giving, investing, and then where you spend your money. And you can use these SDGs as a lens for looking at those areas to say, okay, like you said, positively impacting women in the world could be a lens. And then how do I want to do that through my philanthropic dollars, through my investments, and through how I'm spending my money? And I just get excited from there, thinking about how that translates into our real life and our real actions in our money life.
And it makes it feel very possible, I think, to then think about how you actually do that and make it a reality. So we've seen our investors really get excited about them as we've presented them to our investors. We have a web page now in our website that talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. We include it in our impact report. And we find it's a way to really be able to be talking the same, not talking past each other about what people are trying to achieve with their investment portfolio. We just deal with investments. Unlike you're looking at your client's whole assets, but for us it's their investment dollars. And if we can really connect with that individual or institution at that place where they have a lot of passion.
If you have a story that you could share to help people, I know so much about the great work that you all do. Your website does a fantastic job in helping tell the story of the different thematic areas that you all focus on with the investments, and then how you are helping create impact in those areas. But for listeners, they might not know all of that. So can you tell us a story about how through your impact dollars or through the investments that you all are connected with, how then some of the SDGs are addressed?
I'm going to start with one, Seychelles, the country of the Seychelles, which, might not be as familiar to most people listening to this podcast. It certainly wasn't to me before we started doing our work with the government of the Seychelles, but it's illuminated to me the power of investment capital and connecting it with a shared agenda around the Sustainable Development Goals. In the investment here is the government of the Seychelles. The Seychelles just itself is a family of islands. And if you include their ocean plus their island and draw a line around the country of the Seychelles, it's the size of France. So it's a lot of ocean and a lot of coral reefs, migration patterns for large tuna. It's a big epicenter of our ocean health and life. And the government of the Seychelles has a thriving population, but only about 120,000 people. And a lot of their income comes through tourism. People coming to snorkel, to scuba dive, to enjoy the beautiful coral reefs and the beaches. As you can imagine, over time, what's been happening is overfishing, heating of the waters, big boats coming in to catch the tuna and manufacture and process the tuna. And that has led to some severe destruction of the sea life. A plan was put in place about 2 years ago to begin to preserve the sea life of the Seychelles. And the government did a beautiful job of really owning that plan, articulating that this is for the future generation, to really protect some areas, so not let commercial boats into them, and also to really do sustainable fishing. So train and teach fishermen and women how to sustain their own businesses in a way that's also being respectful of the ocean. And this plan got mapped and envisioned and bought in by all stakeholders, the businesses, the fishermen, the government. The problem is they didn't have money to implement it. They could either go back and raise taxes to individuals that live in the Seychelles, which was a difficult difficult thing to do because there wasn't a lot of capacity for more taxes to be paid by Seychelles. They could go and raise maybe grants or philanthropy from other governments or low interest loans, which was difficult too because they had done a lot of that already. Or they could go and they could issue a bond into the capital markets and try to raise the money. The challenge with that is they don't have a very robust credit rating. They're a weaker government, so issuing money is challenging at an affordable rate. And they also didn't need a lot. They only needed 15 million, which is kind of a small amount to issue in a bond market. And so that's where our capital and other, quote, impact investors came in, is this was the world's first blue bond. People might be hearing a lot about green bonds. These are corporations that are issuing public debt so that they can build or direct their capital investments into sustainable projects. And Apple's, issued green bonds. Other large corporates have issued green bonds. And it's a growing and quite large market now. This 2 years ago was the first ever blue bond, which meant that the proceeds of this bond issuance was going directly to help preserve and save the ocean. And we bought that bond along with 2 other institutional impact investors. And today that blue bond is one of the 110 about investments that one gets exposure to when they buy the Calvert Community Impact Note.
That is amazing. So it's about 2 years old now, you said, or?
About 2 years old. A lot of these transactions in the private debt market take a long time to come together. So don't quote me on this, but it took about 3 years for this deal to all come together, for the government to get buy-in from, the community to implement these plans, for them to go out and raise the capital. But here they are 2 years later, they have the money, they're training fishermen in the Seychelles to have more sustainable practices. They're able to put money towards the monitoring and maintaining of they call them easy zones. These are zones where they won't allow now commercial and other boats in so that they can really protect and regenerate the wildlife.
Did you all have a place where you were able to advocate or use your voice as a buyer of the bond to ensure the bar was held at a certain level for impact?
We were. And so one of the pieces that you mentioned earlier where we had impact was around gender in particular. The bond was written and we asked to be included language around collecting data. Disaggregated data is the technical term of who was being impacted by the fishermen and women they were working with. So were they working with women? Were they working with men? Who was benefiting from the work they were doing with those fishermen to create more sustainable practices? So looking at the gender outcome of those investments was something that we advocated, and it was incorporated into the transaction. So that would be an example of, yes, we did have the ability to really not only get behind what we thought was a really powerful first blue bond that really aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals, but also to do it in a way that aligned with gender, which is also a Sustainable Development Goal number 5, and also a real priority in what we think creates good outcomes and investments.
Thank you for that story. I think that really helps me understand more what that looks like when I or a client is investing money in a Calvert Community Impact Note, and then that money's pooled together with many other investors, and then you all are able to even be so innovative in the way that you're able to create impact, positive impact on the ground and in the ocean.
That's right.
Okay, so I also know that in addition to many countries around the world where investor dollars are going to create impact, you have some amazing initiatives in the United States and what I think of as a type of local investing. even if I don't literally live in Denver, I get really excited about knowing that you have, for example, in several cities around the US, you've got this initiative, including Denver and Baltimore, I know are two, where you're doing some concentrated local investment initiatives. So could you tell us a story about how someone, again, through the SDG lens has been impacted, or their business or a community has been impacted by this initiative?
So indeed, about 60% of our money is focused here into the US and across the whole country. And in particular, as you were sharing, there's some cities where we've really focused the connection between capital and community, enabling investors to target their money to that community and the portfolio of investments that we have there. And one, like you mentioned, is Baltimore, where we have a portfolio of investments, a lot around the built environment, so housing, affordable workforce, education, charter schools we touch in Baltimore. And one of the examples there that, I like, because I think it illuminates where the capital that investors invest in us and we put into communities is really, if not that capital, this project would not have happened. So it's very catalytic. It's enormously important for a lot of projects to get over the finish line, so to speak. And one of them in Baltimore is in a neighborhood that is really changing rapidly as the city has a lot of economic growth. And it's called Remington Row is the building. And it's really built at a workforce housing level. So it's really ensuring that as this community rapidly grows and has more economic livelihoods, that the teachers, that the firemen, that the policemen and women can all stay in that community. It's creating workforce housing, affordable housing for the people that work and live in that community. And Remington Row was a project that had a lot of traditional banks interested in providing the financing that was needed to build the building, but they needed someone to come in a riskier position, in a subordinate position, to make the project finances work and to keep those units affordable. So it could be filled by workforce housing, not by more wealthy clients or tenants. And that's where we came in. We were able to take a riskier position and fill that gap, is often the lingo used, by providing affordably priced capital at a riskier position so that the project pieces could come together and that the project could be envisioned by keeping those rentals eventually at a rate that could be affordable to the workforce. It was also a project where there was great community input, and so a lot of retail was put on the first floor, in particular community assets that they felt like weren't in the community, being a drugstore, a convenience store, really improving the quality of life for the people not only in that building, but for the neighborhood in general.
And do you remember how much you all committed towards that project?
I will have to double check, but I'm going to guess it's about $3 million. So oftentimes these are not huge sums, but it is the money that if it doesn't come in, all the other millions of dollars that are willing and able to move into a project can't go. So really important capital that is the backbone of what we're putting into communities and really made possible by investors buying the note.
What's so interesting to me is how you all on the impact side can be so flexible, creative, and innovative and take risk where other institutions might not be able, like you said, to take the same types of risk. And also on the investor side can be such a, it's not, the Calvert note is not an FDIC insured note, like a CD would be, a certificate of deposit would be. But other than that, it's a pretty conservative type of investment as far as risk goes. So I have to be careful how I say this,
Yeah, you do. I always have to as well.
Clients' reasons, yes, but I think that'll pass. Can you speak about that as far as from the investor side, how exciting this is, that this isn't, a lot of times when we're talking about deep impact investing, like people can do with you all. We're talking about venture capital, angel investing, some of the most risky ways to invest.
And this isn't, to your point, it is what we were founded by our founders 25 years ago, with this belief that investing in community should be democratized, that everyone should be able to do that. The challenge is structuring a product that enables that to be so. But the community investment note is that product. It is a fixed income note. It looks like a corporate bond. And we offer 1, 3, 5, 10, and 15-year terms to our investors at interest rates of 1% to 4%. So we're offering a return and we pay back our principal, and we have done that 100% of the time since we were incepted. So we have a very strong track record of repayment to investors. Now, like you with the compliance, no history is indication of future performance. But it's a strong track record of repayment. And what we've done is ensure too that we've structured our investments to mitigate risk to our investor. So when you buy a Calvert Community Investment Note, you're buying a senior obligation on our balance sheet. We have 20% subordinate capital, so junior loans and equity that sit beneath our note that we sell to investors. So there's a cushion, so to speak, beneath the senior note. If anything goes wrong with one of our investments, if anything goes wrong 1 year with our business, we have a cushion to absorb the losses before we would ever get to our senior note holder. So that's one risk mitigant. The other one is the diversification of our portfolio. We lend across countries, we lend across sectors, so that we're not overly exposed to any one risk, either political, economic, or sector driven. So for example, in 2008, when the affordable housing crisis really was a centerpiece of the Great Recession, that was only about 20 to 25% of our portfolio exposure. And we were able to move through that economic time. And we had some investors say, you were the highest yielding thing in my portfolio, right? Because we were a fixed income, not variable, fixed return to our investors. So they got the same return throughout that crisis as they did as, before and after. The other way, we mitigate risk, I think, is twofold. One is the team we have here. There's 40 of us at Calvert Impact Capital. And I like to say that we're built for purpose. We're fit for purpose. We have a team of 20 people that go out and underwrite the investments we make. They monitor the investments we make. They are professional investment officers. And we go out and we visit everyone that we invest in. On site visits, we get to know the management teams. We underwrite each credit thoroughly. And so we know the markets that we're lending into. And that really, I believe, acts as a mitigant to the risk of lending in places that, quite frankly, traditional money doesn't go today, but we hope it will at some point, that we can show that these investments are really investable, and then the banks and then the traditional markets will come in and do this work as well. We have more requests for our money than we have capital to invest. So hopefully the work we're doing around microfinance, around providing access to solar, whether it's in underserved communities in the US or internationally, if we can invest in these businesses and show that they repay their money, then eventually the banks will want to do this work too. And then we can bring in more and more money to really achieve the outcomes. And this ties right back to the Sustainable Development Goals, because one of the things the Sustainable Development Goals outlined was we have a lot of investment, either philanthropic, government dollars, or investment capital that needs to be really targeted to these Sustainable Development Goal outcomes to get to the type of planet that really is sustainable. And so redirecting investment capital, redirecting government money, redirecting philanthropy to align with these global efforts is what they're all about at the end of the day. That we're not working against, but with each other to the same outcome. So hopefully we can get the benefits of collaboration, of new investment dollars, thinking about what they can do with their capital that perhaps they hadn't before.
A healthy, thriving economic system looks like a healthy, thriving environmental system. So it is diverse, to thrive. And what you're talking about is this ecosystem of, economics and the ecosystem of investing and all the things that have to come together. Yeah, it's not just one entity acting alone.
No, it isn't. And it's always evolving, to your point, whether it's rapidly or it's taking a while. But, even our country, 20, 30 years ago, women couldn't go to the bank and get a loan, right? They needed their partner, their husband. They needed a man to sign. We've evolved from that place. Now we look at investing in renewable energies, and those are becoming more normalized. So we're evolving. Investing in the poor was something microfinance started to normalize. So yeah, it's always evolving. I think our challenge today with the Sustainable Development Goals and what they highlighted is those goals are looking at 2030 as when we will achieve them. That's not too far off.
Yeah.
And so, here we are in 2020 almost, we have a decade. And so there's a new sense of urgency that we're all working with to think about how to make change, even on an individual, personal level now, especially when it comes to your philanthropy or your investment dollars. It's not the most urgent thing in your life. It's not, pounding on your door saying, switch my money, or, think about how you're giving your money away. It takes effort for a person to slow down and think about their money and then make change. And I really admire when people do it because of that. We have so much going on in our lives that pull us in so many directions to stop and think about things that are working just fine for us. It really takes effort, but that's what we need right now, is people to take that effort to do it, because we're needing urgency from everyone to think about doing things different so we can meet the goals that we know are out there and are really coming at us very quickly.
My understanding of just myself and clients and friends and family is that is so true what you said, that it can be challenging to, when things feel generally like they're going okay, it can be challenging to take steps to make changes, like bringing more of your values into your investment life, or how you spend, or how you give in a maybe a bit more of an intentional way. And also, I believe that a lot of us walk around with this cloud over us of concern of the political situations and climate change and lots of these issues that are addressed by the Sustainable Development Goals. We read articles online, and we are taking this in and feel overwhelmed and kind of paralyzed and powerless. And so to me, it's exciting to show people you can feel really great about bringing your own values into these areas of your money life and doing something more in a way that actually isn't that terribly hard if you know what to do and if you have the supports in place to help you do it. It can be really exciting and feel great to connect into this bigger global effort, as the SDGs show us,
I agree. And I like how you articulated, you start your conversation with your life values and kind of frame it in a way that's approachable, and then work into decision making from that place, because we are on information overload. And so if you think about everything as one decision independent of a bigger frame, I do think it can become really overwhelming and confusing. And where do I start and where do I end? And then it's just, forget it, I'll do this another day. But to start with the frame of the Sustainable Development Goals and what are my values, you can just think about gender equity for a few days and what that means to you, and then how you want that to show up. Or maybe it's climate action and you want to think about SDG number 13, climate action, for a few days and how that shows up. And I think then it becomes really consistent and approachable. So I really liked how you do that too.
It does help people get into the deeper why of why taking time out of their busy day, or why, all the reasons we need to connect to that internal motivation and that internal why. It helps to be able to anchor back to that for a lot of people. Yeah. So I'm looking at the Calvert Impact Capital.org website.
Okay.
The reason I wanted to talk with you about the Sustainable Development Goals, because really we could just talk about Calvert Impact Capital the whole episode, but the reason I wanted to bring you on as an expert in these SDGs is because you all just do such a powerful job of telling the story of how you're bringing the SDGs into helping focus the impact that you want to have, and how these areas of impact, like affordable housing, education, environmental sustainability, health, renewable energy, small business, sustainable agriculture, are some of them where you all are focusing your impact, how those translate into impact in the SDGs, in the Sustainable Development Goals. So this, for me, is a great, we'll link to this page particularly. One of the areas we haven't talked about yet that I'd love to hear, just to kind of wrap up, I'd love to hear more about, is sustainable agriculture. A lot of people who work with myself and with other advisors at Natural Investments know how important this area really is for the future thriving of the planet and for the health of people. I'd love to have you connect this to a story, about impact that you're all having in this area.
Sustainable agriculture is a really fascinating area of work for us. A lot of it does take place internationally, where there's a lot of opportunity to work with co-ops, cooperative groups that are really manufacturing, bringing to the markets cocoa beans, honey, all sorts of coffee, tea, and fisheries, honestly, is a new area too, where we're seeing some of that cooperative structure. There's also opportunities in the US that I'll mention, but a lot of our history around sustainable agriculture has been being able to provide working capital to these cooperative groups so that they can buy their inputs and then be able to pay us back when they sell their crop, whatever it is, to the wholesale market. And historically, it's been very hard for them to find, say, $750,000. These are smaller loans, $1 million or $1.5 million to help them do the work they need to do to get their crops to market. But we've been there with other great impact providers, Root Capital being one, another group out of Europe called Ultrafine, really providing the kind of capital that they can't get from a local bank or other institution to do that. That's been a lot of the heartbeat. More recently, what's been fascinating is reaching fisheries, similar, small scale, self-employed individuals working the land to both provide nourishment and food for others, but income for them. We've been reaching them through microfinance institutions. And so a lot of microfinance institutions internationally are experimenting with using the same infrastructure they have to provide small loans to women, to provide small working capital loans to fisheries and fishermen. And so here we are having opportunities to kind of impact sustainable agriculture through an investment that we know very well, a microfinance institution, but seeing this additional layer of impact, which is very, very exciting. Here in the US, it's not necessarily sustainable agriculture all the time that we're able to invest in, but what we are touching is a lot of conservation opportunities. So some of the very interesting work here in the US, a recent investment we made is in a forest resiliency bond. It's the first bond that's really looking to combat forest fires in the West. It's enabling individuals to reduce the chance of forest fires of great magnitude. And what we're doing is pre-funding those costs. We'll get reimbursed from other sources, but they need more money today than they're able to get from allocations from government or others. So that's really neat, kind of project we're working on there. And there's other opportunities in the US around forest, around clean water. Here in DC, in fact, there was the first environmental impact bond that we purchased with proceeds from our investors. And this environmental impact bond is so unique because it's doing two things. Here in DC, there is a need to really improve the water infrastructure, and the choice was to build big gray, they call it, pipes underground, or to do it green, which is to create plants and permeable soil to absorb the water runoff. And that opportunity was made possible by the proceeds from the bond, the environmental impact bond that we bought. So instead of more big gray pipes and hard concrete, this bond enabled the DC water to go and build green, plant more trees, create more soil infrastructure to absorb the water runoff. And that's having better impact for the rivers, because it was sewage runoff that was coming into the rivers and polluting the rivers. Now it's being absorbed, and so we're not having overflow and sewage in the rivers. So the ultimate impact is the measurement of a clean river, which we're seeing improvement around due to these investments. Yeah, very exciting opportunities.
Okay, as we wrap up, Jenn, thank you so much for your time today. I've really appreciated it. I know you have to be a very busy person. Last question just is, for clients of Natural Investments, they probably are already familiar with Calvert Impact Capital and the Calvert Community Investment Notes, because we talk about them all the time, and they have been in use appropriately with certain clients, for many years. And though, for someone who isn't familiar with them, where can they go to learn more?
You can come to our website, calvertimpactcapital.org. And on our website, we have a special page just for investors. And there you can go and read about the basic terms and rate of return. Also, we have our prospectus that you can link to there, which is the offering document for the Calvert Community Investment Notes. Every year it's updated and issued, and it has everything you ever wanted to know about us and the note. And then the impact piece as well. You'll find a link on our website that talks more about what I was sharing, individual investments in our portfolio, the impact they're having in community, and really the need for this type of capital. So I am always too free for any questions. So if you call the 1-800 number and just ask for me, I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone.
And like you said, you have an amazing team as well. Very dedicated, very knowledgeable. Yes. We've loved working with your team.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks again, Jenn. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's been great. Thank you, Carrie.